So I won't go into that. Very much tonight's talk is to do with blind spots, and it's we all can connect to the physical example, but this is about how we also carry blind spots in our own personality. And it affects our perception of events. And I don't know about you guys, but it's something I find quite interesting to think about, because generally we're quite confident about the views that we hold and the way that we see things, but actually it can be really beneficial sometimes to have that challenged, and to have a more broad perspective about the way I look at things, because I can give myself a lot of attention too when I'm quite fixed about the way I see things. So you've probably seen on the back of trucks, caution, if you can't see my mirrors, I can't see you, stay back. And it can be a bit like that if we've got too many blind spots in our personality as well. Look out, this person is out of control. You could get hit, you could get struck. Because if they're not seeing things about how things are, then the reality is there can be a bit of damage, there can be a bit more risk around people that have a lot of blind spots in their personality. And we'll all, I think, identify this. Usually we identify it more with people we know than ourselves. I'd encourage us to look at both aspects of it, because one thing that we'll talk about tonight is that the understanding I will put forward is that no one's immune to having a few blind spots, and it's good to sort of be humbled by these things occasionally. Now our slide changer is a manual person at the back, so occasionally you might get sick of me indicating for changes. So if you can't read this, I can hit my brakes and sue you. And what you can't see can hurt you and others. There's that saying, what you can't see won't hurt you. We flip it around for this talk. Actually, what you can't see can hurt you, because that's the problem with blind spots, and that's why it kind of interests us, is because we can be a casualty of our own personality, and other people can be casualties of our personality as well. And so it's useful in that respect to reflect on it, because why not reduce some of the sort of relationship tension and difficulties and discomforts that we have if we get more insight into ourselves, or more insight into others and more acceptance of their circumstances. So next one. So in terms of defining blind spots, I'm going to focus a little bit on just the physical definition, and then we'll use that to compare or analogize to how it is with our personality, how it is spiritually. So immediately it's the area around a vehicle that cannot be directly observed by the driver while at the controls. Obvious, yeah? If you're in your car, the usual example is if you're trying to change lanes on your right-hand side, and if you look in your mirror on the right, there can actually be someone there, yeah? But you can't see them in the mirror. You need to look over your shoulder and check, or you could have a crash. And we learn that, hopefully, when we drive. So next definition. So another definition, just physically speaking, is to do with our eyes. And this was something I didn't know prior to compiling these slides. But the area on the retina without receptors that responds to light, therefore an image that falls on this region will not be seen. It's the region that the optic nerve exits out of the eye on its way to the brain. So in normal speak, what that means is that actually, did you know, I didn't know this, all of us actually have blind spots in our visual field. It's approximately here and here. There are areas that you don't see, and those areas, do you know what your brain does with those areas? Makes it up. And there's a simple test you can do if you feel like it at home. What you do is you take a blank white piece of paper, put a black X on it, and slowly move it out. Now, you don't focus on the X as you move it out, but you keep focused ahead, because the blind spot's in the peripheral vision, it's not in the direct focus vision. And as you move the paper out while you're focusing ahead, you'll find that where the black X is, you'll reach a certain point where the actual blind spot is, and the X will disappear off the piece of paper. Now you know that the X actually hasn't disappeared, but what's happened is you've put the X, it's finally reached the blind spot in your visual field, and your brain is making up the space from the data around it, i.e. the white paper. And so it just fills the whole thing in as white, and the X disappears. The reason for that is because your eyeball has a nerve that connects to the brain, and the nerve actually goes out through the light receptors in the back of the eye. So it leaves a gap where there are actually no receptors, so the actual eyeball is not getting data about the world in those two particular spots. So the brain corrects for it. And so we say the same thing is also correct for our personality, in the sense that we may think things are a certain way, but what if we've got a blind spot? Even physically, there are blind spots. Can there not also be blind spots in that social, spiritual context? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We look at some common blind spots that are there in the human personality. So that's just saying that the physical referent to understand the intangible analogy. So to understand things that are spiritual, they're not straightforward tangible things. The nature of things which are spiritual is that you usually describe them based on comparing to something else physically. So that's just what we're doing. Oh, no. Well, we'll go with it anyway. So what there is a couple of YouTubes that are just interesting to expand on this theme as well. It's about 4 minutes long, I think, maybe 5, and it's got a whole heap of different optical illusions that have been compiled into one short video. And I personally also found this quite interesting because you're like, huh? And then the way they've done it, you see how they've actually done the illusion. It looks like one thing, and then you realize it's something else. And it just shows how, even in a very straightforward way, our minds play games, our brains make up data, we make wrong assumptions about the things we see, and then we say, oh, okay, it's actually like that. So are you okay to play it, Tim? Fantastic. So interesting, hey, how our brains can be tricked, and it doesn't take a whole heap. Now there's one more interesting, it's just 1 minute YouTube, and it's completely optional, and you choose to play along with it, and you have to know your own medical history, because it's one of those ones that it spins a bit. So if it's not good for you, just close your eyes. But the effect of watching it for about a minute is that when you look away afterwards, just for a few seconds, things are quite funny. I quite enjoy it, but because it's strange that just by looking at something could trick my brain that much. But we don't have medical equipment for people to have a seizure or something like that. So, but this is the other one. It has some instructions for what to do at the start, so you need to go back to the sort of 4-second mark. If it didn't work, that's fine. You can Google it at home, and there are quite a few different ones that you can do. For me, just sort of a little bit of a funny swimming effect in the room with the furniture. So the point of this is just that physically, our brains can be tricked. The world is not as it seems to be, so to speak. And then what about socially or spiritually, in terms of our personality and the personality of others? Are we really so confident that things are my way and the way I see them? So if we can hop back to the next PowerPoint slide, we'll give them a minute to find that. Fantastic. And then in the one after that, if we could, Tim. Cool. So another definition, but this time the more internalized inner space type of definition. The way each being's self-existence in the sphere they're observing distorts their perception, often of themselves, but also of others and circumstances. So the fact that I participate in my life, I'm a part of my world, means that I myself become a distortion on the world. And this is one thing that we like to look at from a meditation or spiritual perspective. And the classic example is someone who has a chip on their shoulder, because we all kind of know there's that personality type. Someone's got some sort of issue about something, whether it's been they're hurt, so they've got this grief that they're carrying with them, or they're always mistrusting about something, or control freak, or there's so many different labels that we tag on people based on certain traits. And these are like blind spots that people can have, because often people may not be that self-aware around whatever that trait is, and we ourselves may be carrying some of those things, and other people may say something to us and we're like, oh, I'm not like that, I don't see that in me, and it may not be true, but sometimes it can be useful to think about. Oh, maybe, I don't know. The next one, Tim. So the first blind spot that we're going to talk about as an example is the belief that, oh no, is this okay? It's about learning my limits so that I can try and improve myself. And no one is immune to having some sort of blind spot, and learn and accept the limits of others, but don't think you can improve them unless they consent. And the reason I've said that is that, I definitely don't want people to kind of come away from tonight and, having just identified the blind spots of everyone close to them and around them, say, you've just got a blind spot, you've got this problem. No, please don't. Because, for example, if it is like a chip on our shoulder because there's some trauma or some pain in our past, then the reason the chip is there is because there's something emotional behind it, and you can't force that kind of change on people, and it's unkind or cruel or hurtful to try and do that. So we just have to, I think, accept people as they are. And I think a sort of big theme of this whole blind spots talk is that acceptance of others and acceptance of myself. And so, some common blind spots. Biggest blind spot, thinking it doesn't apply to me. Everyone's got some form, shape of blind spot somewhere or other. So don't think I don't have any. Number 2, I know. And when a person has learnt to believe showing ignorance is a weakness rather than an essential part of human learning. And I was remembering the past job that I had a few years ago, and I was responsible for supervising someone. And part of supervision is that you have to give some guidance for different things. And as soon as I would try and say anything, I know, yeah, I know. I'm saying it because the person doesn't know and they're not doing that. But you can see they've got this blind spot that their knee-jerk reaction, yeah, of course, yeah. And then they'll continue to be the way they were prior to me saying anything. So it's like it's completely falling on deaf ears because they've got this blind spot. I already know everything. I don't need to hear. And you can think of different ways that this blind spot may actually arise in people's psychology as well. If you're brought up that every time you say that you don't know something, you're told, oh, you're a stupid idiot or whatever it might be, then naturally the way you'll develop is to try and hide or conceal ignorance and pretend that you know things because you avoid getting a scolding or whatever it might be. So that gets into our personality in that way, but then it may also come to a point in our life where it's not helpful anymore. We've developed a habit and we've built sort of mechanisms around it, but then we actually need to let it go. It needs to change because that belief that we hold about ourselves, or that way that we're working in our lives, isn't useful. So if we have that blind spot, we won't be able to learn. We actually block ourselves from learning because anything that we try and develop and we've got this inside, I already know. And maybe they're just repeating themselves because I haven't listened in a way that makes them feel understood. Next. One funny thing, if you use Google Images and you Google, arrogant face, because I was just trying to find a face, because in a sense that slogan, I am right, I'm always right, I know everything, it comes from arrogance, ego. So if you type into Google Images arrogant face, unfortunately poor Julie is one of the first images that comes up. So we've used the image, we'll resonate with that here. So next, or don't you think if I was wrong, I'd know it? So those are just some sort of slogans for that type of blind spot. So a form of arrogance, and separate the arrogance from the external circumstances. Am I using that to justify and conceal something? So by pretending that I'm always right, is there a strategy in that for me that there's something I don't have to face about myself and the circumstances? Is it going to be difficult for me to admit that I'm wrong? So checking points for if this is operating in my personality. And to some extent you might find, yes, sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. That tends to be how I reflect on most of these, that, oh yeah, I can see a bit of that coming in there, a bit of that influence sometimes coming in there. And sometimes it may be caused by other things, time pressure and things like that, but there can be traces of it. So am I listening to others? Or do I have this need to always prove myself right? If something's wrong, can I just let it slide? Or do I have to kind of rush in there and like, no, I'm right, yeah. And everyone has to know that I'm right. Or it's okay, I've got the humility just to, it's not important. Or am I really forceful with my ideas? Or can I accept the ideas of others? And do I beat myself up if I get something wrong innocently? If I have that strong need that I must always be right, then I'll be very intolerant with myself when I make a mistake or get something wrong. And so it's a sort of a checking point for, if I punish myself when I get something wrong, then I may also hold this illusion for myself that I must always convince myself that I'm right, so that I avoid, in a sense, getting my own internal beating. That the way I react to myself can be, unkind or a bit harsh. And so the way I try and sidestep that is to, I'm always right, I'm always right. But actually what's concerning me inside is that, the way I'll treat myself if I'm wrong, and maybe again, it's been something that's been learned for many years from a young age. But I avoid it by playing this game that I'm right, I'm not wrong. So number 4, it's your fault. And the warning sign, you're in my blind spot. And so I put that one up because if someone has this trait, they can be, quite a dangerous person to have around. They always need to allocate fault or blame for something to someone. So blaming others or situations may seem like a reasonable assessment of the facts, but it's also the number one way to disempower myself. So if I have that conviction that it's always someone else's fault, I'm also denying my own personal power in that situation. That even if, there were factors outside my control, there is the involvement of other people. If I've got that strong conviction that it's someone else's fault for it, it's like I'm saying that I've got no role in it at all. But what's my response to it? How am I going to deal with it and manage it? These are still things that I'm responsible for. Even if someone else got it wrong, is it going to help to really come down on them that it's your fault? You did this. Is that going to help the situation move forward? Because responsibility, my ability to respond and my ability to keep solution focused. If I'm working, for example, in a team with people, it's your fault is not a very helpful trait at all, because rather than, okay, what's the solution for the group to move forward, I'll get focused on internal personality conflicts with blaming people in my team for particular things, rather than, oh, well, we're a team, we stand together, we fall together. What's the solution to fix it now that it's gone wrong? Yeah. And if I'm focusing on, focus on the past, how it went wrong, just leads to paralysis. There will be no solution when I'm stuck and it's your fault. It's quite, something I strike a lot at work, which is that, when people are stuck on trying to analyze why it's happened, how it's like this, what the problem is, they get stuck in that, and you keep on having to jump them out of it and say, yeah, but what's the solution? Going forward, what can you do about it now? Because that's happened already. That's how it is. It may be someone's fault, it may not be, but what's the solution to that now? And if you need to work with someone else to achieve that solution, it's not going to help to blame them. That vibe of blame hurts people. It makes them feel disempowered. It's much more empowering to say, okay, yep, it's not worked out well, whatever the parts may be, what's the solution? How are we going to fix it now together? Number 5, communication. Now, this is really like an evening's discussion all in itself, because there's so many areas that you can talk about in communication where there can be blind spots. Our belief or perception about what we've actually communicated to people can be so different from what people actually will acknowledge as being received from the communication. And for me, it's just like there's endless scope for this, because it's definitely something I'm still working on in lots of areas. So assumption is the mother of mistakes in communication. For example, we assume that our communication was effective. I talk, therefore you should know. If I've said something, that doesn't mean that someone else will actually have understood it. Their understanding is something else, and there may be a whole heap of reasons that they don't understand it. I had a client a couple of weeks ago, and the consequence of what I was saying was so severe in his life that it was impossible for him to understand what I was saying. The prospect of being homeless and the family being made homeless was completely inconceivable. And so I could have wouldn't have matter how many different ways I said it. The emotional reality of what I was trying to suggest was the wall was up. You know what I mean? And so communication is deeper than words. What are the emotions that people hold will actually determine how they can receive communication. And also the emotion I can deliver with can also affect communication as well. I know for myself that, if I'm too serious or if I'm too harsh in the way I'm presenting something, then it will break the communication. People won't be able to understand what I'm saying because there's something wrong with my message, actually. It's not being delivered in a package that's attractive to people. And not that we have to, make everything so nice and sweet, but, if I'm coming at someone with this anger in my tone, etc., then it will be harder for them to actually understand, because it might create an emotional response in them that freezes their ability to receive the communication. And I think, therefore, you should do, or I think, therefore, you should have understood me as well. Sometimes we can assume that just because it's in our thoughts, other people should know it or understand it. I don't know if you've caught yourselves doing that. I've caught myself doing it sometimes. And I haven't even broadcast the message. I just think that because it's in my mind, it will also be in other people's mind. And then I get surprised. Oh, you don't know that? Oh, well, you never said. And so becoming an active listener, even while speaking. And by that, I was meaning that when I interact with people, am I listening to the feedback that people give me? Because when I'm talking to people, they're always giving feedback. They may not be speaking, but for one thing, you can kind of tell if you're talking to someone when they tune out. And a lot of conversations finish because we've learned different techniques for expressing or showing that we're no longer interested in the communication. It may be because we're looking at, or our attention's just gone to something else. And it affects how people are going to receive that communication, and they understand that time is up. I may have said nothing, but there's different things that we do to express communication is over. So being alert to that, because if I'm still trying to force my communication onto someone and they are giving me all the signals of I'm breaking away, I'm disengaging from this now, they're not listening anymore at that time. There's a really cool exercise that you can do as well. I'm not planning to do it tonight, but maybe another time, where you pair up with people. One person has to sit and listen, and the other person has to talk continuously for 60 seconds. And then after that 60 seconds, the person listening feeds back the information that they heard. And it's very interesting to see how much someone can retain. And it's also very interesting to see if I'm even comfortable to speak continuously for 60 seconds. And then you can make it more fun, whereby you do it back to back. Have you ever tried to speak to someone when you're not getting any feedback signals at all? It just feels wrong, basically. And we take for granted the fact that we do actually actively listen in conversation, and it's only when you do little experiments where you remove something that's familiar and then you go, that's weird. Like, it's not normal just to stand with your back and talk about something to people. You're expecting some interaction. Just little things, oh, what's wrong with that person? They haven't understood there's some social cue that they're missing. And 6, being a lawyer for myself and a judge for others. And we become a lawyer for ourselves and a judge for others rather than being a lawyer for others and a judge for ourselves. The meaning of this is that, the idea of a lawyer is they present a case so that they make excuses and they elaborate things, give an explanation for why things are a certain way. So often for ourselves, it's like, why was I late? Why was I this? Why was I that? Oh yeah, there's a reason for that. It's like this, oh, I've had a really bad day. It's a bad week. This happened, that happened. So I've got all the excuses in the world for myself, but for others, I come down like a ton of bricks. What? Why are you like, how can you be like this? Yeah, for ourselves, it's, oh yeah, whatever, I've always got 500 excuses already to pull out of my hat to explain why things are a certain way. And so it's unfair. It's a double standard, yeah? The way I treat myself, the standard I hold myself to, is completely different from the standard I hold others to. And the aim of spiritual empowerment is that it actually reverse that. It's far more empowering for me if I try and deliver my own conduct, at least at the standard I expect of others, preferably even higher, because that's what I have control over. I can't control others. So what's the point in sort of thrashing them with judgment? It's not going to help them. But I do have control over myself, and I can change the way I am. So it's much more useful to be a judge of myself, not a critic of myself, not hard on myself, but just to honestly assess, am I buying my excuses? Do I really believe that? Am I just, selling myself a sweet story? And if something happens with someone else, would I be compassionate and think of some story as to why that's happened? Okay, there's a reason why they've done this, Something's happened in their life. Are you stressed at the moment? Are you really busy? Is that what's going on? Or do I jump to being like straight on harsh, that there's no excuse, it's unacceptable? I'm guilty of this one quite a bit. So we judge others by their behaviors and outcomes. You expect them to judge us by our intentions. And by that, because generally I find most people got quite good intentions, but sometimes we're not looking at their intentions. We're just saying, did you deliver the result? Did you achieve what you said you were going to achieve? Has it happened yet or not? What's going on? Come on. But for ourselves, it's like, oh yeah, no, but I didn't do that because of this reason. Yeah, I meant to do that, but this happened, or this happened. And so again, the double standard thing, it's just another way of describing the same thing that we're talking about. Next. Cool. Labels and prejudice. Again, this could probably be a whole night in itself. It unpacks so much. But conscious or not, we often tag people and then we treat them according to the tag rather than according to what presents. Now, a few people may have heard this example, but it's a great example. I was at a program where they played this game one time, and the way the game worked is that there was a retreat program with about 80 people in the retreat, and about 15 people there was actually just 9 people sat in a circle, and each person had to wear a hat, and their hat had on it a different negative tendency. And everyone in the group could see the other person's hat, but the person wearing the hat didn't know what they were tagged with. And they were sitting in a circle and they had to have a meeting. In this instance, they were discussing with the Soccer World Cup was how to prepare for the Soccer World Cup that was going to be held in Oman in 2022. So they just made this example up. So some of the things on the hats were like, don't trust this person, they're a liar. This person's an idiot, don't listen to them. This person is just a joker, laugh at everything they say. Various things, but this scenario, they were all different types of unflattering comments. And the rule in the game for the meeting that they were going to have, the fake meeting, was that you just have to treat people according to the label on their hat. That's all you have to do. Whatever is there, you have to assume it's true and interact with them on that basis. And after the game had unfolded, everyone got to take off their hat and see it. But before they took their hat off, they described what their experience was. And only one person was slightly off key for it was. Everyone else was like, everything I was saying was like, no one believed me. I don't know what was wrong, and they just laughed at me like I'm an idiot. And what it says on the hat. Yet they can't read it. Yet they're reading that just from the way they're treated. They could tell that no one listened to them, that their views weren't respected, that, some people got quite offended, like, they just didn't respect anything I said. And then they would read the hat and go, now I understand why, because that's according to the rules of the game. And so the moral of that story is that how much do I hold labels for people in my life? that are unkind. And for me, I think they're secret, but they're not secret. They definitely come through in the way I interact with people. And, we may think, oh, this person's always full of rubbish. Whatever they do, they're full of rubbish. Or I'm very, this person unsafe, or whatever it might be. But they'll get that from the interaction. And to an extent, I may actually feed into, participate in the problem that I experience in the relationship with someone because of that. I'm not saying that I'm the sole cause or anything like that, but it's to acknowledge that the way I treat people can also help create the problem. And I don't know, if you think about relationships, there may be people that being with this person, they bring out the best in me. And there may be other people, you say, well, this brings out the worst in me. And it could be that this is what's happening in the background. If someone is seeing really good things in you, then it will make you feel good about yourself. And it will make the relationship become really strong as well. And the converse can also be true, that if there's someone that I kind of always find faults in, don't really like them, there's problems with them, and I always find issues, then that will come true in the relationship as well. I'll be interacting with them in that way, and they'll be feeling that from me. I shouldn't think that it's concealed. It's not concealed. It may be private in my mind, but it will come through in my communication. And as people may have seen, that when they say what counts in communication, language counts, the words themselves count for about 15%, and the 85% is tone, vibe, body language, and that's where we communicate it. So what we're holding inside definitely reaches people. And so one of the practices we have here is what we call soul consciousness, that when I'm seeing others as spiritual beings and recognizing that the original self, the spirit in each one, is positive and good, it helps me create a new positive label for the people that I'm interacting with and dealing with. Because then I've got something to move it across to. It's hard just to sort of go, okay, they're not this negative thing, they're not this negative thing, they're not this negative thing. So I'm still actually feeding into or giving power or energizing that negative thing. But if I'm moving my mind across to something positive, that they're originally good, the nature of each one is peace, love, purity. Everyone's got a story for how they lost their peace, how they got stressed out, how their purity slipped away. But we all know that also each one, no matter how they are now, they used to be a little baby in their mother's arms. They used to, they had to learn to walk. They had to learn to talk. There's an innocence, there is that in everyone's history as well. And so sometimes we end up getting focused on the story that made them be maybe something that's got some less attractive qualities, but we forget the good parts that can be in people as well. And so that's what this one is about. Do we treat people according to their tag, or according to what just presents? So everyone wants to be treated respectfully. Holding negative labels for people in my awareness can block the transmission of respect. When we feel respect from people, generally those relationships work well. Yeah, there's respect. Great. If respect drops, then eventually tension or problems will come in the relationship as well. So it's not inherently bad to label. So just to stir you up, the practice here is to become the world's most prejudiced person. That's what we focus on in the Brahma Kumaris. We want to become the most prejudiced people possible. But with positive prejudice, the original nature of each one is good. There is intrinsic goodness in every human soul, that peace, love, and happiness are the original condition of everyone, and to treat them in that way, to get that response from people as well. Because prejudice itself isn't actually bad. It's the fact that we prejudge people with negative tendencies that creates a problem in our lives. And it's not becoming blind or dumb about the reality of the challenges people have. I can still be quite aware of the fact that people may be struggling with things, but I try not to go that little bit extra and write them off or tag them as being they're permanently like this. I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and they said, oh, that person, I remember when they did this, this, and this. It was something they were recalling that was 10 years old. I thought, 10 years, that's pushing it. Like, can they have not changed in 10 years' time? I think they can. People can be completely different people in 10 years' time. So how long am I going to hold things inside? Because it also doesn't allow other people to change as well. Hence the example with the tagging. You know, if I hold a negative vision on people, it can actually block them from being able to change. And lucky last, number 8, and this can be a bit of an interesting one to think about, but it's quite connected to the it's your fault type of blind spot as well. But it's statistical likelihood that those who consider themselves to be victims will in the future be a perpetrator. Now, I've used a pretty rough and raw example there, which is domestic violence, but that's because there's straightforward statistics on it. People who have grown up in violence are statistically far more likely to express violence on other people in their lives, even if they themselves were the victim growing up of violence. When they're older, there's also more likelihood of being a perpetrator. And this blind spot is to do with feeling I'm a victim of things in my life. And it's not just about violence. In fact, that's the smallest example. But there are lots of different ways that we disempower ourselves in our lives with the belief that it's someone else's fault and I'm not responsible. And the risk to sort of running my life like that is that there will come a time when I actually play out or do the things that I blame others for being. It's like two sides of the same coin are there inside, and I may be playing out one scenario at this time, but in a future time, I will actually be living out or expressing the very thing that I don't like or wish someone else wouldn't do. Another example is bullying, and maybe a workplace or something else, but people who feel powerless try power over others. So that sense in which if I'm bullying someone, is it that someone wants to express their power over someone else? It's actually because they feel weak inside. There's a patheticness in that they're holding on to. And it's only if they can actually start to empower themselves inside, feel good about themselves, that they won't need to try and feel good about themselves by bullying or having power over others. Makes sense? So spiritual power or inner power is power over myself. You know, when I really become internally empowered, I don't need to demonstrate, express, or exert power over other people. Actually, that's a sign of weakness. In the same way that anger is a sign of my own weakness. It may feel authoritative and dominating, show my strength, my authority. But if it's just anger, it's not actually. It's weakness inside, and I'm masking that with something else. And if I'm honest with myself and I look at what I'm doing, it's interesting to see and to check inside, okay. Because ultimately, we're the ones who have to assess and work out, where it's coming from. Oh, yeah, was I like that? Is it, am I selling myself a false story about how I really was, or is that really the truth of what was happening? So now to end, we're going to have another meditation. It will last for about 15 minutes. And then I think there is a sweep that Jackie will hopefully give out. And the night will end. So meditation, I think you're familiar with, will play a commentary, but sit as is comfortable for you. If you're comfortable to have your eyes open, Tim will put that picture up again with the point of light. We use the point of light here as a focus. If I've got something external to focus on with my eyes, it does help create that point of stillness inside. But if you find it too hard to meditate with your eyes open, then just close them. We want you to enjoy the meditation and feel the peace of the place. That's the main aim of the game. And then the lights will come back up at the end, so there'll be some guided commentary and also a little bit of instrumental music at the end of it. Okay, thank you.
When I meditate, I'm doing something that I do throughout the day, thinking. But when I meditate, I try to use my thoughts in a positive way, to begin to use the mind how I want to use it, and not just how I'm used to using it. So first of all, I sit comfortably, relaxed, allowing all the tensions to slip away. Gently breathing in and out, allowing the body to come to rest. I let the feeling of peace wash over me. And I notice that my thoughts seem to be more concentrated and originating from somewhere around my forehead. I let my thoughts concentrate around this area. As I focus my thoughts, it's as if that area of thought is becoming smaller and more concentrated, until I become a little pinpoint of energy. So small and powerful and alert and so peaceful. I imagine myself to be a tiny point of light. Powerful, concentrated light, like a laser beam or a star, constantly emitting light. I enjoy this feeling of light, this feeling of stillness. So silent. So comfortably peaceful. I begin to wonder what sort of person I am. What sort of qualities I really have. The silence I am now experiencing makes all noise and complex interactions seem like funny scenes of a stage play, far away from where I am now. I'm beginning to see that all this is just a role, that my true nature is peace, I can see this quality within me. I have this quality constantly. And I picture myself constantly giving this quality to others in my actions, in my words, in my thoughts. I am the embodiment of this quality. I am a beautiful being of light, constantly emitting this wonderful quality of peace. A point of light. Sending out rays of light filled with this quality. Powerful rays of light, filling the world of light which surrounds me. And around this point of light, slowly, I imagine a body of light. Not atoms, not molecules, just beautiful light. And at the center of that beautiful body of light, I sit, sending out light and more light through my body of light and out into the world. And very gently, I allow one tiny ray of light, one little thought to return to my physical body.